Welcome to all the basketball fans around South Dakota, talking some high school hoops with Michael McCleary of the Argus Leader and, of course, Jason Andera, Midco Sports, every week. Break down some of the happenings of the ranked teams, and we're going to start in boys AA, where Washington started the year out as the number one team, took a little dip, started coming back with some nice wins last week against Pierre and Aberdeen, but ran into a really good O'Gorman team. I think O'Gorman's still pretty good, Michael.
Yeah, they're really good. And the great thing with O'Gorman was they just showed so much versatility that they maybe haven't even shown earlier in the year. Something that I found interesting is obviously, unfortunately, Radley Monty went down at pretty early in the third quarter. He's their starting point guard. But even before that, Rush Landry, who is their 6'5" forward who generally plays in the middle, was taking the ball up a lot. And Manny Struck took the ball up a few times. Like, they just had so many different looks with who can take the ball up the court. And obviously David Alpers is a dominant rebounder. So they just have so much to show that they haven't shown yet. It's obviously still really early in the season. I have to keep on reminding myself of that because it feels like we've been in the season forever.
Yeah.
But O'Gorman, just ever since that first game against Roosevelt, they've just kept on improving. And I'm really excited to see how they keep on going.
Yeah, this Washington team, I don't think is at 100% yet either. They continue to escalate. You can tell that they've got the tools. Michele Camballo has really improved his game, and he didn't play a ton of minutes in that game against O'Gorman. They got into kind of a weird foul trouble situation. It wasn't like bad foul trouble, but it was just at inopportune times and didn't get as many minutes as he usually does. But you can tell his game is there. And I tell you what, Washington is going to be a team to watch coming down the stretch. In boys AA, everybody's kind of got a loss here except for Roosevelt. They're still undefeated, but everybody else, I mean, Mitchell, Yankton, all these teams. Pierre had a rough week. They lost to Winter. There's been just like we expected, a lot of unexpected stuff happening this year.
Yeah, and a couple of these teams that we just mentioned, they're not even in the top five. So
Right.
There's so many teams outside of the top five that just have that 1-2 losses that maybe are preventing them from getting in. Maybe one loss. Obviously, at this point of the season, we're judging the quality of the loss and that type of stuff. So, there's a lot of teams, probably at least 7 teams that at this point could potentially contend.
All right, let's move on to boys A, where I mentioned that Pierre lost to Winter, and Winter continually moves up that radar, and they're still unbeaten, moved all the way up to number 3 in the latest rankings.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think Winter started the season outside of the rankings, and just they haven't lost. So they it's almost like football all over again. They like, when is Winter going to lose? They picked up a really nice win over a AA team this week, and just you like to see that they're doing so well at this stage of the season.
Yeah, they were down to Pierre most of that game, and then at the end took the lead for the first time, and then they took the lead again with just 8 seconds left as Blake Vollmer hits a big shot to give them the victory. So Winter looking pretty good. I saw you at the Sioux Valley game watching them, the former number 2 team playing, who dropped a couple of games this year and dropped down the rankings a little bit, but everybody knows Sioux Valley is still a pretty good team. What were your impressions of the Cossacks watching them on Tuesday night?
Yeah, they got a lot of really good players on that team. Obviously, point guard spot is not something that they ever have to worry about. But yeah. I was really impressed by Alex Squires as a sophomore, 6'10". He looked like it might have been a bit of a stretch at 6'10", but he's got a really good feel for the game for his size and his age, and he played a really good game, dominating the rebounds, finishing up looks, and just making sure that they were just all set in the middle, because they got a lot of perimeter guys. Like even Parker Petts was shooting really well in that game. And, they got a lot of guys that could shoot on the perimeter, and obviously, pretty good point guard that can get to the basket. So, I was very surprised when I saw the outcome against Flandreau in that Big East Conference Championship game. But they rebounded really nicely, and that was a big thing that they talked about this week.
Yeah, this Sioux Valley team they got all the pieces that they need. That was evident. Alex Squires, you mentioned, the big guy, he missed all of his freshman year because he had some growing pains and had to get some things fixed. And boy, he's come out this year and been a real factor as a sophomore, not having played varsity ball before. So it's been really interesting to see how he's going to work with Oliver Vincent as they move down. But you're right, they lost to Flandreau. A team just with one loss, with an impressive 30-point win. That's one of those games that just avalanched. I think if they play again, it'd be a much different battle because they were close at the end of one quarter, and then everything just went Flandreau's way. But Flandreau, another team that we should probably be talking about as a potential state title contender. They move into the rankings this week as well. But Dakota Valley, St. Thomas More still getting those first place votes. Winner still undefeated. Sioux Valley we talked about, and then Flandreau and T-Area. T-Area, of course, lost a game out of class. So just one loss in class for them, and that's among several other teams that are receiving votes right now. So Class A still, to me, seems pretty wide open. How about to you, Michael?
Yeah, I mean, those four and the two teams that are tied for fifth, I mean, just the players at the top of that team with Vincent, Tash Lunde from Flandreau, and Kalen Dean from T. I mean, man, there's some players in Class A. These are players that would dominate in the class above. And I don't think that's that surprising in South Dakota basketball. It's pretty, the parity is pretty good, but there's so many talented guards. And Lunde obviously has a perimeter game, but he's big body too. So, there's a lot of really talented players in this class.
For sure. Let's talk about Class B now a little bit. The rankings came out, of course. DeSmet still number one. White River playing really well. But how about Lower Brule? They lost one game so far this year. That was to Clark Willow Lake. But they've had a lot of impressive wins, including a win over West Central. I'll tell you what, I look at a guy like Hisham Thai, and he's averaging 17 points per game right now, almost 9 boards per game. He is probably not getting enough recognition as being one of the better players, but they've got 4 guys in their starting lineup that average over double-digit points. I think Lower Brule is a team we have to watch. But Class B, once again, it starts and ends with the DeSmet conversation, but I think there's some other teams that are making a case.
Yeah, White River and Joe Saylor is always going to have a bid there. But like you mentioned with Lower Brule, I was extremely impressed with West Central after that opening game against Sioux Falls Christian. I think I talked about this last week too. Yeah, they could shoot really well, and I was talking to their coach after the game. Like, he was saying, if people think that this might have been an anomaly, that we can't shoot like this every game, they're in for a surprise. We're going to be shooting like this, and I believe him. They've kept it up, and so for Lower Brule to get a win over a team like that, I mean, that's a really huge thing. But like you said, DeSmet is at the top of this class just with the guys that they have on that team. But there's a lot of intrigue in the top 3 as well here.
Yeah, a quick mention too. Timberlake continues to stay in that top 5. They're still undefeated. They got a big game coming up Saturday against Fulton area, a team that's 8-1. So their biggest competition there until they get a little bit deeper into the season. But I think they're another team to take a look at. Let's move to girls basketball. In girls AA, Washington took on O'Gorman. Always a great battle. It was 1 versus 2. Washington hadn't lost yet. O'Gorman came out to the Washington gym and took care of business. You were at the game, Michael. What were your impressions?
Yeah, it was Hannah Ronsick versus Jackalinga Wenatanda. It was a really good game. O'Gorman really had the first punch, and they really were the first team to get into a rhythm offensively. But towards the end of the game, Jackalinga just sort of started going off a little bit and just sort of showing, what makes her the number 34 player in the country for ESPN. There was a lot of really, really good players on that court. Obviously O'Gorman has quite a few with Melly Abdouche too. And Bergen Riley was playing great, getting a lot of rebounds. Washington O'Gorman 1-2, like that was supposed to be a good game, and it was. So, obviously O'Gorman gets the win there, gets a big win over the number one team in the class, but these are teams that are going to be, facing off in close games for the rest of the season.
Yeah, in rest of Double A, again, you've got a lot of one-loss teams here: Stevens and Central and Brandon Valley and Watertown. A lot of teams that are hanging right there, but O'Gorman with an impressive victory to get things done. Let's move to Class A again. We talked about it last week, but just so many different teams getting that number one vote. It's going to take a while to separate what's happening here, and we talked a lot about those teams. But are there any other teams we need to talk about that are maybe lurking, that are probably not getting noticed, maybe that should be?
I mean, I feel like we got to just keep on bringing up how impressive West Central's been. They're obviously in the top five, but they had to kind of work to get there. Just keep on winning. So similar case with Winter and.
You got a super tough schedule, by the way. West Central has been playing a gauntlet. Right, they're right in the middle of a gauntlet right now, and they're still undefeated.
Yeah, so they're a team that is obviously they've shown that they're legitimate, and Flandreau and St. Thomas More, like they are the gauntlets in this class, I would say. But West Central, as long as they keep on playing through their schedule, there's no reason why they can't be up there. But there's like basically the entire top five is undefeated in this class, or at least pretty close to it, one loss. So it's going to be really interesting. There's a lot of really good teams in this class.
Yeah, that's why it's so hard to figure out, because St. Thomas More's only loss came to a Wyoming team, but you're right, the rest of that top five still unbeaten. Dakota Valley finally took their first loss earlier this week after the rankings already had come out. But Wagner, another team that beat Corsica Stickney, I mean, that's a quality win for Wagner. Wagner's probably a team that we need to start mentioning as one of the top teams. I think Lakota Tech, they lost to Red Cloud earlier this year. They avenged that loss with a double-digit win over Red Cloud, and I had Red Cloud as talking to some other coaches as a team that could really cause some havoc, and Lakota Tech beat them handily. So I think Lakota Tech is a team we've got to talk about. They're coming up and going to get to play at the Hanson Classic. I want to see how they perform there. But Parkston's been a good team. Florence Henry's still undefeated. Andy Central Dakota Christian still undefeated. I think Class A is one we could talk about for an hour and not give enough justice to some of these teams that are playing really well. So we'll keep an eye on Class A and talk a little bit more and see how it shakes out after a really competitive week for a lot of these teams, including West Central, and a lot of these teams that'll be at the Hanson Classic, which we'll touch on in just a little bit. Moving to Girls B, we talked about it. Wagner beats Corsica Stickney. Corsica Stickney has played a really tough schedule, but stays at number 2 despite those 2 losses. And they've got a couple more tough games coming up. So it'll be interesting to see how Class B shakes out. Do you think Corsica Stickney is vulnerable from maybe being pushed out of that number 2 spot if they continue to lose?
Well, it's tough because they're playing a really, really tough schedule. So, you can't really hold it against them too much. And, next week, or not next week, in a few days, they got Flandreau on their schedule at the Hanson Classic. So, this is going to be you expect them to be up there just because of how good Avery Broughton is. I think that maybe people are giving them a little bit of leeway with those losses just because they're playing the tough schedule, and they got a really good player on that team, really good players on that team. But if they do keep losing, then they're gonna fall. But this is a team that I still expect towards the end of the season, maybe after they exit this really, really tough part of their schedule, that they're going to find a little bit of groove.
Well, tonight they're at Winter. Winter is a team maybe not as strong as they've been in the last couple of years, but that'll be quality competition. You mentioned it, Flandreau at the Hanson Classic, and then another undefeated team in Andes Central Dakota Christian next Tuesday. So a tough week, and I think they got to get probably 2 out of those 3 for wins to continue to stay where they're at. But you're right, the tough schedule, you can't blame them for that. The rest of Class B, we talked about Roncalli every week, and they just keep passing every test. Aberdeen Christian still undefeated. DeSmet moves into the rankings. They're undefeated, and I tell you what, this DeSmet team, they won a couple close ones this year, but they're playing really well right now.
Yeah, we talked about them last week. They're impressive.
I think so. We're going to bring on a guest. Yesterday, I had a chance to talk to Jim Bridge, of course, the guy who pulls the trigger and runs the Hanson Classic. And this is really the busiest time of year for him. And he gives us a little insight on how he does the seedings or how he does the matchups on this and what it takes to make this a successful event. Jim, how are you doing?
Well, it's pretty much the busiest week of the year, maybe busiest 2 weeks of the year, I should say. But, always excited. Anybody that's a basketball fan in South Dakota, Class A and B, I think looks forward to this week.
Last year, COVID affected a little bit. You limited the number of fans. What's the COVID situation this year?
Well, like even at our school, I mean, we're starting to see changes and effects of it just on our own attendance levels that I'm sure it's happening all over other schools. But yeah, last year was a little different. I think there was such an unknown. Nobody really did know what was going to happen or if it was going to, what it was going to be. I think people are a little more not afraid of it as much, or a little more resilient, or a little more defiant maybe too. But we're going to try we're hopeful that everybody, I haven't seen many other games that have been postponed. There probably have been some, but we're going to try and operate. And so last year what we did was we did go with a pay-per-view system last year for broadcasting the games. And I don't know if we don't necessarily like that choice, but we have to try to do what we have to do to make the event survive. I mean, your expenses continue to go up, and to put on a quality event, it takes revenue, and I'm not very good at reaching my hand out and asking people to sponsor. I should be better at that, but they get bombarded and hit with requests to sponsor things. We would welcome more sponsors, and I've even had opportunities to change venues and go other places with more sponsorship. But with the city of Mitchell and the Corn Palace, we've tried to honor that history, and we've tried to keep things going that direction. And so the pay-per-view allowed us to hopefully recapture, generate some additional revenue to make up for the loss of attendance. And it's hard because some of those schools that are playing on Saturday, they might have their boys playing in another different direction on the same day, so that divides their own fan base. Or maybe you have people that are concerned about COVID, or you have grandparents that maybe live in another location that that does allow for them to maybe be able to watch from Arizona or Texas or some other place too, that provides a trade-off for some of those people to be able to view their grandkids maybe playing. But the Hanson Classic is that teams want to play in a situation like that where it feels like a tournament. It's a tournament flavor with people watching and a little bit of an atmosphere that you can't duplicate in practice. You can't duplicate it in a regular season game. And for a lot of them, some years this is their state tournament, because you have teams that are in the same region classification. Wagner, Parkston, Hanson are all in the same region. Ethan, Bridgewater, Emory, are in the same region. So sometimes those teams don't get to move on, and this is their experience maybe, or it helps prepare them for that experience coming down the road. And so that's, I think, why the Classic has endured the test of time with, the quality of teams that are in, the quality of the matchups, which takes a little bit extra effort to kind of pay attention to teams. But we've been very fortunate with that. And so we're obviously, again, very excited to do this.
So the Hanson Classic set to go on Saturday. Of course, weather's always an X factor in this one, but it looks like Friday is probably the worst that we're going to get with weather-wise. So hopefully the Hanson Classic is not affected. But a great lineup as usual. We've got a ton of D1 players in this. The first D1 player we get to watch is winner at Andy's Central Dakota Christian, and winner's got Bella Swedlin, who's heading to Kansas, and she's coming off of a 30-point game and a 23-point game. That should be a lot of fun. And then every game after this, what are you looking forward to in the Hanson Classic here, Michael?
Well, that last game we mentioned earlier, of course, Stickney Flandreau is going to be a really, really great game. But, Wagner, West Central, St. Thomas More, Parkston, these are all really, really good ranked matchups. So these last 4, 5, 6 games of the day, maybe even 7, starting with that Hanson Wolsey Wessington game, like they're going to be really, really good. And that's not to say the first 2 aren't good matchups as well. It's just we're starting to get into these ranked matchups, and team, like we were kind of talking about with some of these other teams, like teams are going to take losses just because only one of these 2 really good teams are able to take a win in this. So the Hanson Classic is going to be there's going to be a lot of volatility throughout this lineup today.
Yeah, for sure. And I mentioned Bella Swedlin, and we've got Wagner has potentially some D1 talent that hasn't declared yet, but we could definitely see that. Corsica Stickney, of course, with Avi Broughton, Flandreau with Claire Shepard, St. Thomas More always has a ton of great players. I mean, just a basketball fan's dream just to sit down and watch game after game after game of really talented coaches, players, teams, and just some of these individuals that are really standout. So looking forward to that. I'll be there for the last couple of games of the day. You'll be there for some of those games as well. So looking forward to getting some good coverage out of this as well. All right, let's take a look at some of the big games coming up over the next, 7 days, I think, or maybe, they never play Wednesdays. So the next 6 days, we've got some really impressive games, starting with some games tonight where Crofton takes on West Central and Corsica Stickney is at Winter. Those are both girls basketball games. Crofton, of course, state champs from Nebraska. They played a really good game against Hamlin a couple days ago and beat them by 1. Now they get a tough opponent in West Central. And we mentioned West Central. They've got Crofton. They've got St. Thomas More. And then they go to the Hanson Classic where they take on Wagner. That's 3 really tough games for this West Central team in the next 3 days.
Yeah. I think everybody's.
Go ahead. Yeah, talk about.
I think everybody's getting to that part of the schedule where you're going to play some really tough games in a row. Maybe you start the schedule off a little bit lighter, but it's I think as we've kind of seen as going through and breaking down some of the schedules, it's not really getting easier for any of these teams.
Exactly, and that's great. That's what these teams want. They want to get the tests that they can in December and January to get ready for February and March basketball. Boys hoops, we got some interesting battles coming up Saturday. Lincoln takes on Roosevelt. Roosevelt has not lost yet. Lincoln has shown that they can compete with some really good teams, but they would love a signature win here going to the Roosevelt gym. And then T-Area, they're continue to schedule more and more AA teams. They got a tough one at Aberdeen Central. And then O'Gorman takes on Aberdeen Central as well next Tuesday. So those are the 3 big school games that I'm looking forward to in the next few days here, Michael. What do you think this Roosevelt team gets tested? They can't continue to win, can they? Can they just win out here?
I mean, I don't know. They've looked really good, so maybe they can. I mean, but Lincoln will be a big first test there. Obviously, JT Rock is, as far as size goes, there's nobody in the class that matches up. But Elliot Whitney's playing really good as well. He's scoring a lot of points for them. And, I think, Lincoln's probably been a little bit outside of the rankings, maybe on the lower end. But, they're a team with a ton of potential because they're pretty young. So, it's I think over the course of the season, they're going to keep on getting better. And this Roosevelt team is maybe a bit too early of a test for them, but it's a late enough in the season test where, maybe they could surprise.
Yeah, I think that game could go either way, but Roosevelt has been super impressive on both ends of the court, and consistency. That's one thing in AA not a lot of teams have had. I think this Roosevelt team has had that. Just looking at some of these other games coming up next Tuesday, we've got some fun ones in girls basketball. Hamlin takes on DeSmet. DeSmet's still undefeated. I think that will be a lot of fun. In Marshall, Minnesota, they always have been playing Washington the last few years. Marshall's a good team this year, and they get to go to the Washington gym to take on Jakalinga, Wenentanda and company. So always great games on the horizon coming up, and I'm excited. We don't have any live games coming up on Midco this week. What do you guys, anything special from the Argus this week?
Well, we're going to be down at the Hanson Classic on Saturday. So next week is still up in the air, but that's what we got right now penciled in on the schedule.
Looking forward to all the coverage coming from you, Michael, and hoop season. We're right in the thick of it. And this week and then next week, another Hanson Classic on the boys' side. It's going to be a lot of fun to see some of these mid-season state tournament field games, and hopefully we get a lot of good matchups coming out of these next 2 weeks. All right. I think we did it, Michael. Thank you to Jim Bridge for coming on the show this week. And next week, we'll try to bring on another guest coach. And as always, looking for feedback from you guys. If there's anything you'd like to see on the show, let us know. For Michael McCleary, I'm Jason Andera. We'll see you next week.